Political Review. Welcome.
Yes, Quincy Parker, Seattle and Johnson. I was listening to your show, and what prompted me to call is the fact that if you listen to the undertone of what you've said and what they've said, it's an absolute need for basically shift to the new economic models that has basically taken over the world, accelerated by COVID, and beginning in 2020. As a protagonist, an agitator, an advocate for embracing digitization of the economies, for actually March 3rd, make 2 decades of actually doing it from this jurisdiction. And you made mention of the DARE bill and others. And I would tell you that in 20 years, I've yet to see a single policy or an act that was made for primarily benefits of Bahamians and inclusion for them into the new economic models that the world is quickly evolving to. Even where we are beginning to talk about this new carbon economy that is estimated to be $2 to $3 trillion by 2030. And we are said we are the leaders in this region in setting the trends, and the Prime Minister's going everywhere. I have not been able to find a single written document showing our policy or strategies for implementation involved in it. A lot of the funding that's available globally in the green economy, the blue and ocean, which could come back as a subset of the newly emergent carbon economy, we don't seemingly have anything that would direct individuals to that way. As you talk about the development of the skill set, the human capital development, as we move into digitization, and I could tell you, artificial intelligence is going to accelerate what COVID has started. We don't have an education regime that actually begins for the preparation of upskilling of those within the country, though I think we have the ability, the competence for the upskilling, but we just don't have the strategy to actually transfer or acquire these skills for the new involvement. If you look at the Bahamian economy, as we brag about tourism numbers have come back up, you'll see that if the numbers are back up and the hotel is reaching occupancy, and the fact that the workforce has not returned to match pre-Dorian, you would then naturally assume then that we're having something called a jobless restoration or jobless growth. Now, if you take a moment and you look at the tourism industry, Hello?
Go ahead, Seattle. I apologize. I didn't mean to interrupt.
Right. I'm saying if you look at the tourism industry for restoration at the $7 million range that we said we reached back in, and most of those are visitors on coming to inclusive hotels called cruises. If we look at from an economic standpoint, from the dollars spent, if we look at even getting 300,000 of those converted, meaning that we need to re-examine the model of tourism to basically capture maybe 300,000 of those 7 million people or 5 million people that's on those cruise ships and somehow convert them in. And if you use the numbers that is given to about the spend and just round it down to $1,000 per week for the 300,000 people, spread out over the number of time, we could easily add a few $1 billion to the actual gross domestic product, but at the same time move towards, as we call it, these short-term vacation rentals, which when the people come would stimulate the activities, meaning that we'd have to have what is called a defined destination type environment, bringing them back beyond sun, sand, and sea, reintroducing service. But when you look at when you say for the small business growth and development, as someone in it, and I heard Carl Bethel, Carl Bethel, and I've watched him, and I watch others who try to enter the digital space, and I see where he's going, where with the fintech type environment, with his crowdfunding environment. But if you look at the policies and legislation in place, he is going to have a struggle in regards to doing that because there's no real policy to bring in the real fintech space that's supported by SUP tech, which is supervisory tech, reg tech, which is regulatory tech, prop tech, which is property technology. Then you have to move into that, something called insure tech, and even TradeFi. And so we are still trying to do so much from an analog type environment when the world is moving digital. And now with artificial intelligence entering the space, the economy is going to be moved at the speed of thought. And so, I've talked to so many people across multiple administrations and see a lot of people who somehow knows what needs to be done, but it somehow we never seem to be able to bring people around the table that knows how to have those things done. And we hear things like technology hub and all of these different things, but nobody talks about the infrastructural improvement that these things are built on. We talk about teaming up almost like a form of sister city. And so you go to another sister city and say, oh, they have a tech hub, and then they're going to help us develop ours. They're struggling, and I don't see how they would develop us to become a competitor to them for the type of environment. And so essentially I think somehow we need to talk about the digitization of the Bahamian economy. Now, we talk about digitization, and since 1968, we've been trying to digitize the government so that we can have a digitalization. We talk about digital transformation, which is a culture among people. But, I don't see, and I'll challenge you to go back for 20 years or 30 years and present at least one written policy or an actual strategy that one could say, these are the steps that we have to take, these are the things we have to do. Because we talk about things a lot, but we don't seem to bring people around the table that actually can actually do these things. We seem to be locked into this family, friends, and lovers, foreigners, political party club. And I could tell you, Quincy, not holding too long, but going from COVID, and even now, someone has been involved with artificial intelligence for going on 2 decades, and having a wife that's one of the first set of Gen Zs, 1996, 27 years old, being involved with artificial intelligence, machine learning, and deep learning and these things for the 6-7 years we've been together. And I would consider one of the most proficient people in that country. There's no room for her. And so even now, as the world is beginning to change, and we have developed these platforms, very similar to Mr. Bethel and others, that we have to begin to look at our jurisdiction as being more viable than the country. Because even when you call government ministries and government ministers, and even as a foreigner, you see calling these development investment corporations, office of the Prime Minister, you cannot get a single bit of information, a single call, or even anyone in any ministry to have a conversation in regards to how can I do something. I guess in some degree it'd be that when C. Allen Johnson called, I don't know, I think it may bring a form, a level of intimidation when I'm simply not seeking to intimidate or fight. I'm simply saying this is something that I personally want to do. So in my interest, I'm willing to tell you and even direct you exactly how to do it. But this is the first time I've been scared in a long time for my country that I see the growth.
Yeah. Yeah. And the thing is, you and I have been at this public conversation thing a while, and there's always the question of whose agenda is being promoted, when the reality is, I believe in your case and also in my own, the goal is to spread and broaden and inform the national conversation, right?
Yes.
But there's also, for me, and I'm speaking purely for me here, a bit of frustration because the national conversation seems to go in circles. And we as a community seem content to talk about things that need to change without actually changing those things that we talk about.
Yes, you're absolutely correct.
I find it frustrating, but I mean, it is what it is, I guess, right?
Yeah, and I know people call me a critic or something. I call it critique, and I've seen the expertise that came in here for 20 years, and I've publicly spoke to what it is. It's not the expertise that came in. They were doing what they were instructed under the brute supervision of individuals. I call them midgets with large blowhorn, what is that thing we use? Megaphones.
Megaphones, yeah.
Yeah, who do the talking. And so, and people say, oh, you quit it. I said, no, for someone who has been in the technology business before desktop considers essentially in the purest sense sits on the table. I've seen the development of the internet. I've been from PBS board, and I'm going to be 60 this year, and I've been in the business for 47 years. I've seen every major development of technology today has developed. I've spent more money on personal technology than most people will earn in 2 lifetimes. So this is not like somebody that talks about it. For people who know me, they live immersed in it. And even for the individuals, the ministers from Bahamas could tell you, from going back from the early 2000s, when they came to my house, I had as much computers as IBM and other things, mainframes computers set up in my house. And they've seen it. This is not like I'm telling them about it, but yet once they get into office, it seems to be like a dome of eloquence as opposed to execution. So I'm hoping that now that maybe the people, as they become aware, will actually start making demands. I think they're beginning to feel it in their wallets as opposed to you just talking, but begin to make demands for the change that is necessary. But I can tell you, though, if we were to reimagine the tourism product and take ownership through the way Mr. Bethel is doing it and others like myself that's entering into the fintech space, we could build out 10, 20,000 bed and breakfast in this town in the shortest period of time that will actually stimulate the construction industry and retain the 85% of that money that leave. But we have to have a conversation as one of inclusion and actually an open mind and not one of saying political allegiance to say what is best for us as a country, as a people. I'm looking forward to it, but if it doesn't happen, for the sake of my family, with a young wife and 2 young kids, I have to consider my options for her and for them. Also, I don't want to leave after being home for 20 years of advocacy, but sometimes you have to make decisions that's in your best interest. Thank you so much for letting me vent.
Thank you very much for calling, my brother. Appreciate it. All right. That is a much more mellow version of C. Allen Johnson than I have heard at other times in the past. And I think that his comments are thought-provoking, and I would like to take him up on his challenge. I think I'm going to do that.